What if peace after 70 was not about adding more, but letting go? There is a strange heaviness that many people feel after crossing the threshold of 70. It is not in the bones, nor in the knees, nor in the back. It is in the silence of the soul when everyone else has left. It is in the quiet of the room when the lights go off and the mind whispers, "Is this all that is left?" You have lived through wars, weddings, births, betrayals. You have watched people you loved walk away or pass away. You have sacrificed your youth, your body, your energy for others. And now in the autumn of your life, no one told you that the greatest battle would not be about illness or old age, but about meaning. A quiet, aching question that knocks without sound. What now? Welcome to Buddha Story, a place where ancient wisdom meets the unspoken truths of today. A space not just for learning, but for remembering what your soul has always known. And today, I invite you on a journey, not to add more noise to your life, but to begin subtracting the unnecessary. What if you have not reached the end, but are finally close to your beginning? If this message resonates even a little, if it awakens a curiosity inside you, then please subscribe to Buddha Story. It gives us the energy to keep sharing the stories that truly matter. There is a story in the Zen tradition about a scholar named Haruki who came to visit Master Jinsen. Haruki was proud, well-read, and convinced he had nothing more to learn. He spoke endlessly about scriptures, techniques, rituals. The master listened patiently, then poured tea into Haruki's cup. As the tea reached the brim, Jinsen kept pouring until it spilled all over the table. Shocked, Haruki exclaimed, "Stop! The cup is full." The master looked into his eyes and said, "And so is your mind. Come back when you are ready to empty it." This story has echoed through centuries, not because of its simplicity, but because of its painful truth. Many who reach a certain age begin to live off their past wisdom like dry bread. But true wisdom is not in what you already know. It is in your willingness to unlearn. A few years ago, in a retreat I was leading in Bhutan, a man named Elliot arrived. He was 82, retired military, stoic and withdrawn. He admitted that he had only come because his daughter forced him. He said nothing for 3 days. On the 4th day, he asked, "Do you really think I can still change?" I asked him, "Are you still breathing?" He nodded. I said, "Then yes. The breath is proof that life is still offering you a classroom." On the final day, Elliot stood before 50 strangers and shared how he had cried alone every night since his wife died 15 years ago. But he had never spoken of it. He carried her photo, but also his guilt for not being able to save her from the cancer, for saying things he never meant when she was ill, for moving on with life but never letting go. He said, "I thought grief would pass like a season. I did not know it would become a room I never left." That day, Elliot left behind more than his silence. He left behind the belief that his soul was done growing. That was the first letting go. Sometimes what we have to release is not anger or trauma or regret, but the illusion that we have seen it all. Now let us talk about relationships. It is one of the heaviest topics for people over 60, especially when those relationships are close, family, children, siblings. But not all blood ties are sacred. In the teachings of the Buddha, compassion is never about blinding blame. It is about clarity, about seeing what nurtures and what poisons. There is a powerful story in the Jataka accounts of the Buddha's past lives, where he was born as Prince Danta. In that life, his own father, King Surapala, was greedy, violent, and driven by conquest. Prince Danta tried to influence his father's ways, but was met with mockery and humiliation. After years of quiet inner conflict, the prince walked away from the palace, renounced his wealth and titles, and lived among villagers, offering healing and protection. He said, "A house where love cannot grow is no better than a cage, even if the roof is golden." This story was not meant to encourage rebellion. It was a lesson in spiritual boundaries, in learning that sometimes walking away is not an act of rejection, but of honoring one's peace. I have met women in their 70s who still allow their adult children to speak to them with cruelty because they fear loneliness more than pain. I have seen elderly fathers endure constant belittlement from their own sons because they confuse duty with punishment. But what if the greatest offering you can make to those around you is your own serenity? You are not a tree planted in guilt. You are not a rock obligated to endure storm after storm just because the storm is familiar. Let us also speak about physical and emotional clutter. One of the most symbolic practices in monasteries across Asia is sweeping the floor, not because it is dirty, but because it teaches presence. A young novice once asked his master, "Why do we sweep every morning if it is already clean?" The master smiled and said, "We sweep to remember that the dust never stops settling, and so must our awareness never stop returning." There is a woman I remember from Singapore, age 74. After her husband's death, she left his room untouched for over a decade. Clothes still hung in the closet. A pair of shoes waited by the door. She said it brought her comfort. But what she did not realize was that it also froze her heart. One day, she decided to pack it all. She kept his watch, gave away his books, burned a love letter they once exchanged, and said, "I did not lose him today. I released the version of myself that could not live without him." Decluttering is not about minimalism. It is about making space for your life to return. And this brings us back to the central question. What if peace in old age is not something you chase, but something you uncover by letting go? Not letting go to forget, not to give up, but to finally stand in the gentle truth that your soul is already full and needs only to breathe again. Now let me ask you something to reflect on. Imagine this. A, you believe the past holds your best years, and now life is about slowly letting go. Do you believe your wisdom, silence, and freedom now make you more alive than ever? Which one speaks to you more today, A or B? Share your answer in the comments. Not just for the algorithm, but for yourself. Because sometimes the act of choosing your truth in public is the first step toward healing. Writing a new chapter after 70 is not a fantasy. It is a sacred right. There comes a time when the world starts speaking a strange language to those who age. It whispers that your time is past, that you should step aside, shrink, become quiet. It wraps this narrative in compliments. You have done enough, now just rest. But beneath them lies a quiet dismissal, as if age is a disappearance, as if the final decades are only a slow dimming of light. But this is not truth. This is conditioning. And if you have lived beyond 70, it is not your ending. It is your invitation to finally live with depth, without apology. I once met a woman named Eleanor during a silent retreat in Portugal. She was 77, had raised 4 children, survived the loss of 2, and been widowed twice. Her eyes were tired but kind. She told me, "I spent my entire life giving everything to everyone. Now I sit here and wonder, who am I now that I am no longer needed?" That question haunted me, because Eleanor was not asking about identity. She was asking about permission, permission to matter, permission to exist outside the role she had performed for so long. And in that question, I heard the grief of many. The world defines aging as reduction, slower movements, fading relevance. But spiritual traditions, especially Buddhism, speak differently. Aging is not losing, it is unveiling. It is the stripping away of illusion, of ego, of rush. It is the sacred process of returning to essence. When you no longer need to impress, to compete, to win, what remains is presence. Let us talk about this presence. Because one of the most devastating lies told to the elderly is that happiness comes from the outside, from family, from visits, from grandchildren, from television, from distractions. And when those stop coming, sadness creeps in. But that sadness is not from absence. It is from outsourcing your joy. There is a concept in Buddhist psychology called santuti, the satisfaction that arises not from getting what you want, but from wanting less. The monk who sleeps on a stone pillow and smiles at the sunrise is not smiling because he lacks needs. He is smiling because he knows how to find joy in breath, in bird call, in the warmth of sun on skin. I once visited an old monastery in Nepal where I met Brother Anand, an 86-year-old monk who spent his mornings sitting by a stream. Every day he would carve small prayer beads from wood. When I asked what he did with them, he said, "Nothing. I carved to listen to the silence." That answer stayed with me because it reminded me that the most sacred happiness is not found in excitement, but in stillness. You do not need noise to feel alive. You need attention. You need a return to the sacredness of the ordinary. And here is another heavy illusion we must release: the comparison to youth. In the age of images, of social media, of glowing skin and tight bodies, the elder face is often erased or mocked. Wrinkles are airbrushed, gray hairs are dyed, slowness is edited out. But those who carry decades in their spine carry something far more valuable than image. They carry weight, the weight of memory, of survival, of witnessing what others are too young to understand. I remember a moment during a workshop when a young woman asked an 89-year-old man, "What was the happiest day of your life?" He paused for a long time and then said, "The day I stopped trying to be young again." The room went silent, because in that sentence he freed himself. He claimed the beauty of being who he was in full. We are not meant to compete with our younger selves. We are meant to evolve from them. The flower that blooms in youth does not envy the tree that bears fruit in age. They are different seasons with different purposes. The older body does not perform. It radiates, and that radiance cannot be sold or captured. It must be embodied. Now let us approach something even more tender, regret. One of the heaviest burdens in the heart of the elderly is not physical weakness, it is emotional residue. Regrets over words unspoken, love unreturned, paths not taken. These regrets wrap around the heart like invisible chains. They do not scream, but they hum beneath the surface. What if? In Buddhist thought, clinging to the past is one of the main causes of suffering. Because the past cannot be changed, it can only be met. Met with compassion, met with forgiveness, met with honesty. I once counseled a man named Daniel who had carried shame for 50 years. He had cheated on his wife once in his 20s, confessed it, and lived with her for another 4 decades in silence and guilt. After she passed, he came to a retreat and told me, "I do not think I ever forgave myself." I asked him, "Would she want you to carry this pain forever?" He wept and said, "No, she would want me to be free." That is the heart of it. Regret is not a punishment. It is a doorway. If walked through, it can become wisdom. But if ignored, it becomes a poison. And the antidote is not forgetting. It is integrating. Looking at your younger self, not with judgment, but with the same tenderness you would offer a child who did not know better. Forgive not because the past deserves it. Forgive because the present needs it. And lastly, we must shatter the lie that it is too late. This lie has silenced so many souls. It has stopped people from starting new relationships, from learning new skills, from expressing dreams they kept buried for decades. But the truth is, as long as you have breath, you have beginning. In Japan, there is a term, ikigai, which means your reason for waking up. It is not something that ends with retirement. It evolves. It deepens. I knew a woman named Margaret who began writing poetry at 84. She had never written a line before in her life. When asked why she started, she said, "I finally have time to listen to what my soul has been trying to say." At 86, she published her first book. At 88, she was invited to read her work at a university. When someone asked if she wished she had started earlier, she laughed and said, "Maybe I was not ready to speak until now." This is what the world needs. Not more youth, but more elders who speak, who shine, who live without shame. You are not running out of time. You are standing in the most spacious part of it. So let us return to the beginning. If you feel forgotten, dismissed, or invisible, it is not because you are fading. It is because the world has forgotten how to see. But you can teach it, not by shouting, not by chasing, but by standing in your quiet power and living fully. Your breath still carries purpose. Your hands still hold beauty. Your silence still holds weight. You are not finished. You are finally free to begin.